20th, 2025. Anderson? Barlow? Boner? Brennan? Case? Case? Cooper? Crago? Crum? Dockstetter? Driscoll? French? Grew? Hicks? Hutchings? Ide? Jones?
Excused.
Excused. Cole?
Excused.
Landon? Larson? McEwen? Nethercott?
Excused.
Nethercott here. Olson?
Excused.
Pappas? Pearson? Rothfuss?
Excused.
Salazar?
Here.
Schuler?
Excused.
Scott?
Excused.
Smith? Steinmetz?
Excused.
Barlow?
Excused.
Brennan?
Excused.
McEwen? McEwen?
Excused.
President Beitman?
Excused.
Mr. Vice President, 21 present, 10 excused.
Right. Prayer by the Reverend Richard Gilbert.
Thank you again for the opportunity. This is my 25th year of greeting some of you with prayers on these Senate mornings. Senator Larson, he was president at the time, was the first to invite us to come for a week, and I have enjoyed my presence among you. Usually I try to pick a theme for the week. Some years it has been scripture, some years hymns, some years quotes from former governors of Wyoming, one year the second inaugural address by Abraham Lincoln. Last year it was the Four Sisters in the glass dome among us. This year I would like to use what I call positive prophetic phrases. Vice President Salazar, thank you for the opportunity to pray.
Yes, thank you.
May we be at prayer. Almighty God, we would be what fire is to a steam engine. Within our beliefs, words, and actions, may there be creative energy which provides locomotion, drive, and purpose to life. We would be people who equip others to have the opportunities and the energizing means by which they are able to reach your intended purposes for their lives. We would not be stagnant nor stationary when we have the opportunities to provide movement and meaning for others. Today, we remember Martin Luther King and the energizing influence he provided for many. And we are prayerful for Donald Trump's peaceful inauguration and your guidance in the selection of cabinet members. May we provide inspiration, instruction, legislation, and means for others to get on track and achieve your destinations for their lives. And may we be pulled and pushed with the fire of love, faith, and hope that burns and churns within us all. So we pray today. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Senator Craigo, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Reading corrections, approval of the journal. Will the reading clerk please read the journal committee report?
Mr. Vice President, two journal committee reports that the journal of January 17, 2025 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Senator Crum, Chairman.
Thank you. Our doctor of the day is Mr. Ray Geringer. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. As was said earlier, today is Martin Luther King Day and everything that means. Today in Wyoming history, in 1913, the fourth day of the session, Republicans and Democrats fought hand and fist during a 45-minute shouting match over who should sit in the speaker's chair. And the quote of the day, just one small positive thought in the morning can change your whole day. Good advice. One announcement, again, the lunch money, it needs to be paid today. That I believe is $304. So, good. Senator Guru.
Privilege of the floor.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. As I look at the clock on the wall and then peeking at Senator Pearson's phone, it seems that we have sworn in a new president. I just wanted to say, I know all of you would join me in saying, Godspeed, President Trump.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Minority Leader. Unfinished business. Madam Majority Leader.
Privilege of the floor, Mr. Vice
Yes.
President. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Because rodeo queens cause such a stir, we are joined today to your upper left, good senators here in the gallery, with two incredible young rodeo queens. And I want to get to this introduction because I've had so many senators approach me this morning to make sure I would be introducing these talented young women that I figured I would expedite those concerns about the recognition this morning. And so I would like to welcome Shelby Hubler, the 2025 Hell on Wheels Rodeo Queen, and her lady-in-waiting, Sage Scoggin. Ladies, if you could wave to the senators who are your biggest fans. Good senators, the Hell on Wheels Rodeo began in 2020 and features 6 open rodeo performances over the course of the summer. Cowboys and cowgirls from across the Mountain West compete in both timed and rough stock events in front of visitors from around the country and across the globe. The royalty represents Hell on Wheels at each of the rodeo's 6 events and at various events throughout the region. Ms. Hubler, Shelby Hubler, is a senior at Cheyenne East High School, where she is an active member of FFA and National Honor Society. She has earned her Congressional Award Gold Medal and is a 5-time National Science Finalist. Wow. Sage Scoggin is a senior at Central High School and serves as the Vice President of the High Plains FFA chapter. She and her team placed 6th in veterinary science during Wyoming State FFA finals. Both girls are members of the Cheyenne Frontier Days Dandies, all right, and maintain excellent grades at their respective schools. They'll be heading to Laramie in the fall. Shelby will major in health sciences, while Sage plans to major in animal science. Joining the girls are Jim Walter, rodeo program manager for the rodeo, Laurel Bellotti, their royalty coordinator, Dominic Bravo, the CEO of Visit Cheyenne, and Stacy Walters, the rodeo logistics manager. Another warm welcome to the wonderful people making sure our Western heritage thrives here in Laramie County. Mr. Vice President, I think we have additional privileges of the floor to share about these wonderful ladies. I think that we have some family members here in the chamber of Ms. Hubler.
Yes.
Yes,
Anyone?
we do.
Anyone? We do have family members.
Be a proud, beaming parent. Here she is. Mr. Vice President, I must say that I've never had so many people come up to me in one morning to give me information about the talented rodeo queens. With that, I think it speaks to your talent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. Unfinished business, rules adoption amendments. What? I already did all the announcements. We're at that order of business of adoption of rules. Madam Majority Leader.
Mr. Vice President, I move that the Senate rules and joint rules previously adopted as the temporary rules of the Senate of the 68th Legislature, together with any amendments adopted by the Senate, be adopted as the permanent rules of the Senate of the 68th Legislature.
You have heard the motion. Before voting on the motion to adopt the temporary rules as the permanent rules, the Senate will first consider any proposed amendments to the temporary rules. Amendments to the temporary rules require a majority vote for adoption. I believe there are amendments. Majority Leader?
Mr. Vice President, I think, I just kind of have a point of inquiry here, that those rules are being passed out. Are they on everyone's desks? Including my own? Have the proposed rules on your desks? I see one senator is indicating yes.
Let's take 1 moment to make sure everyone has those.
Where they might
Have an amendment. Mike, Mr. Vice President, if I may provide further clarification during this small break as we get these rules handed out. For those of you that are online, if you go, they're not located on our calendar of the day. They are located during the 2025 general session legislation tab, and under rules and legislative procedure tab is where you can find those proposed rules. And I believe those numbers are being updated as we go.
Madam Majority Leader, why don't we take a minute and for those numbers to be updated so that everyone can understand where we are. Senator Hutchins?
Mr. Chair, would it be in order to ask that we lay this back, postpone it until tomorrow, so we can thoroughly go through this? It seems like we get these rule changes, and within a few minutes, you want us to vote on them, and I have not had time to review them. So I'd like to know if it's in order to postpone or lay it back until tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So Senator,
Thank you.
yes, Senator Office.
Thank you. I believe we're on our limitation of what day. I believe that we are required to pass them today.
Ah.
This is the 5th day, but that does not mean we have to do it right now. So we could do it as a late order of business in the afternoon rather than first thing this morning. That would be in order if the Vice President so chooses.
Let me consult on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you read them? I was just getting them.
Members, to give people more time, we'll lay this back until after the noon recess so that you can thoroughly look at the rules and have a better idea. Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think that's a good idea. This year I transitioned, so I didn't transition the way you guys are thinking, but I transitioned so that I am not doing paper copies of amendments, but I'll be bejiggered if I could figure out how to find the rule changes on our online. So maybe everybody else is in the same boat. Maybe we could have the rule changes actually paper copied, everybody, if that's possible. I see they're on a different color paper, which would be really handy.
We will do that, Senator Case.
Thank you.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Privilege of the floor.
Yes.
Mr. Vice President, several years ago, the legislature authorized the creation of a 8th community college district. Then the voters, my community, Campbell County, enacted it by ballot, and that college has been in existence for just over 2 years. I thank the legislature for doing that, and I'm pleased to announce that as of today, we have been cleared for the accreditation process, which is a very big step forward. And we anticipate, if all goes well, accreditation as the 8th independent community college district in the state of Wyoming by the end of 2026. So I think that's great news for students, for our communities, for job training, et cetera, that we will have yet another community college fully accredited, hopefully in 18 months. So thank you to the Senate. And if I could, Ms. Janelle Oberlander, the president of Gillette Community College, is with us. If you have any questions, she'd be glad to answer them. But thank you, and onward with the pronghorns. If you didn't know what the mascot is, it's the pronghorns, Gillette Community College District. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Barlow. We'll go to the standing committee reports.
The following reports are dated January 17, 2025. Mr. Vice President, Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 55, third-party filers, respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Boner, Case, Dockstader, Landon, and Steinmetz. Senator Case, Chairman. Mr. Vice President, Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred Senate File 49, Tangible Personal Property, Index, and Depreciation. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators French, Ide, and McEwen. No, Senators Case and Pappas. Senator McEwen, Chairman. Committee Number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred Senate File 17, Carbon Dioxide Enhanced Oil Recovery Stimulus. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Cooper, Jones, Nethergott, and Rothfuss. Senator Anderson, Chairman.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Vice President, that bill that was just read in, Senate File 17, Carbon Dioxide Enhanced Oil Recovery Stimulus, does have appropriation on it. I would ask that be referred to appropriations.
Without objection?
Without objection, of course.
Yes. Then Senate File 17 is re-referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations. Senator Case.
I'm about to do kind of the same thing, Mr. President, but I didn't actually hear you refer that last bill. I heard without objection, but probably should say it is referred to appropriations.
Okay, I thought I did, but I'll definitely do it again. So Senate File 17 is re-referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations.
And then if I can tag on, Mr.
Yes.
Vice President, Senate File 55, which was just read in, the name is third-party filers. It also has an appropriation, and I would ask that it be sent to appropriations. Thank you, sir.
Yes, without objection. Senate File 55 is re-referred to Committee Number 2, Appropriations.
Back to reports, dated January 17, 2025. Mr. Vice President, to Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 59, Registered Agents Release of Records. Respectfully report same back to the Senate. Recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Case, Dockstader, Landon, and Steinmetz. Senator Case, Chairman. Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred Senate File 56, Providing False Information to Registered Agents. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Case, Dockstader, Landon, and Steinmetz. Senator Case, Chairman. Committee Number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred Senate File 53, Trademarks and Trade Names Administrative Cancellation. Respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Boner, Case, Dockstader, Landon, and Steinmetz. Senator Case, Chairman.
Thank you. Members of the Senate, I just want to again thank Dr. Geringer, who's in the back as our Doctor of the Day. Doctor, thank you so much for being here. Let's show him our appreciation. Bills on second reading. Senate File 6, second reading of this bill.
Senate File 6, Residential Property, Removal of Unlawful Occupant.
Senate File 7, second reading of this bill. Oh. Senate File 6 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 7, second reading.
Senate File 7, Protection Order Amendments.
Senate File 7 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 11. I can separate this.
Senate File 11, Use of Fraudulent Documents to Wrongfully Possess Property.
And there is an amendment. Do we have the amendment read in?
Senate File 11, second reading amendment number 1, page 2, line 2, delete.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 11 and ask for your favorable consideration. Good senators, you see this amendment strikes the word residential from the bill draft. The effect of that is it eliminates classes of property for this crime to apply. So if you are, using fraudulent documents to wrongfully possess commercial property, that's just as wrong as if you're doing it to possess residential property. So I think that's important to focus on the mens rea associated with the criminal action instead of parsing out different types of property. So if it's ag land, commercial land, industrial land, or residential, if you use fraudulent documents to wrongfully take that property, it's the same crime. With that, I'd stand for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Discussion? Any discussion? Roll call. Question being called. All those in favor of Amendment 1 to Senate File 11, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Senate File number 11. Oh, excuse me. So Senate File 1 to Senate Amendment 1 to Senate File 11 has passed. Senate File 11 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it shall be so ordered. Senate File 25, second reading.
Senate File 25, Electronic Lien and Title System.
And there are amendments to this. Can we read these amendments in?
Senate File 25, second reading amendment. Number
Senator Brennan?
Senate File 25, second reading amendment number 1, page 1, line 6, after.
Senator Brennan? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I would move second reading Amendment 1 to Senate File 25 and ask for your favorable consideration. During our discussion the other day on this bill, some concerns came up about how the transaction fees and that would work on this bill. You should find on your desks a handout that have some information on that. And then I have an amendment to hopefully help address some of the concerns that came up. On page 1, line 6, after rulemaking, we would insert requiring a report. And then in section 3 is where we would have that report. And so upon promulgating a fee schedule for the electronic lien and title system or not later than November 1st of 2026, whichever is earlier, the Department of Transportation shall report to the Joint Transportation, Highway, and Military Affairs Interim Committee on the fee schedule that will be used to implement the electronic lien entitling system. I hope this can address some of our concerns, and I would ask for your favorable I vote.
Discussion? Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of Amendment 1 to Senate File 25, please say aye. Opposed? Carried. Amendment 1 to Senate File 25 has passed. There is another amendment, I believe. Senator Rothfuss. Can we have it read in? Just a minute, I'm sorry.
Senate File 25, second reading amendment number 2, page 3, line 5, after.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I move second reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 25 and ask the body's favorable consideration. Mr. Vice President, this goes to the discussion we had about passing on the fees to the consumer, even though there are savings to the user of this electronic lien system, and basically indicates that those transaction fees are going to be charged to the user and paid by that user rather than passed on to the consumer. So it goes on to page 3, line 5, after system, and then captures the list that we see just below that on lines 8 through 11, talking about the folks that are actually going to be utilizing the system, the dealers, lenders, lien holders, insurance companies, et cetera, and secured parties, and indicates that those shall be the entities that are paying it, and that, as you see, it shall not be passed on or shall not require a customer or other person not normally engaged in the business or practice of financing vehicles to pay any transaction fee charged under this subsection. So if this is a system that leads to savings, as we have heard, the savings will effectively go to the consumer rather than just being passed on as an additional way of adding fees to the system. Ask the body's favorable consideration.
Any discussion? Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Yeah, just a question to the bringer of the amendment. Your intent is not to preclude payment of these transaction fees if the customer asks for it when they do an application online, because there would be no dealer or anybody involved at that point. And so if the customer, if the end customer, the end user, would want to use the electronic system, they're going to have to pay the transaction fee. I just want to make sure that your intent is not to preclude that.
Let's get some other questions. Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just a question on this and the process. So I've got a lien on a vehicle. I paid my lien off to my lender, whatever that is. I go in and typically file that once that's paid, and then the title changes. So it becomes the title of my property without a lien against it. Why is the lien holder now responsible for changing that associated with this, that now the lien holder pays that transaction fee by changing that? So I'm just curious as to how that works when you have a lender or a lien against something and you're using a title, electronic title here. Who pays that when those liens and loans are paid off against that?
And then Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. On the initial question from the chairman, it's certainly my understanding in visiting with the sponsor of this amendment and reading the pure language of the amendment that this is about the pass-through from those entities that are using this system or required to use this system in a later paragraph. It does not preclude individuals from participating in the system. Now, I think it's fair to say we could clarify that, potentially with a third reading amendment. And then on the second one, to the good senator who was asked about releasing a lien, I guess it would seem to me that whoever the lien holder has to actually release the lien, and then they would be paying for that fee, and then it would go to the recipients. But I guess I'm not as familiar with that, how that would operate. But it's a good question, and I think we should flesh that out because it's important in the way this occurs. So the one, I think this still allows individuals who want to participate to do so, but we can clarify that. The second one, I guess there's probably a banker or two in the room that could speak to some of that. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Rothfuss, any other questions?
Last
Sen-
time.
Last time.
Last call.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. That's correct. So when you look at the language on page 3, let's see, it starts on line 14. Each person not normally engaged in the business or practice of financing vehicles, so the folks not on the list above, can use this system optionally. They're not compelled to use it. This amendment is dealing with the compulsory use by the list specifically, and says that these compelled entities shall not pass on their fee to the consumer. They're the ones that are saving the money, they're the ones that are asking for it. They're all going to use the system and they're not going to pass it on. This amendment doesn't touch that individual regular consumer in any way. And if anyone's uncomfortable with that, I'm happy to accept additional language. I think everyone understands the intent, but I think the language gets there just fine as intended, so that it's only dealing with those on the list, so to speak, of those who are normally engaged in the business or practice of financing vehicles, et cetera, versus those persons not normally engaged in the business or practice that we see on lines 14 or 18. I hope that clarifies it for the good senator, both here in Laramie County and a little bit to our west.
We're on Second Amendment 2 to Senate File 25. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? Okay. Let's see some hands. All those in favor of Second Amendment 2, please raise your hands. Or stand. Please stand. Senator Case.
You should call it out first, and then we could call a division.
I see. Okay, thank you, Senator Case.
You bet. Either way.
All those in favor of Second Amendment 2 to Senate File 25, please stand.
Division.
Okay. All those opposed?
All those people in DC. Excuse me. Oh, was that?
Second Amendment 2 to Senate File 25 is passed 21-6. Senate File 25, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Senate File 40, second reading, and I think there is amendments, if we can read that in.
Senate File 40, zoning protest petition amendments.
Senator Larson.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File number 40 and ask for your favorable vote. This amendment deletes the 50% and moves it back down to like 33%. Currently in statutes, it's 20 that can have a protest, and then does the same, well, it does it in 2 different areas. One for if you, on
Senator Larson, I apologize. Can we have that amendment read in, please?
Senate File 40, second reading amendment number 1, page 1, line 15, delete.
Thank you, Senator Larson.
Mr. Vice President, I move the motions, or the amendment, so we're okay there, I guess? Okay, I'll go back through it. This deletes the 50% and puts in 33% on line 16. On page 2, line 1, it deletes 50% and inserts 33%. And page 2, line 5, it changes the majority to 2/3. And I guess I'll go ahead and explain it a little bit. I think we've gone a little bit too far. Currently in statutes, it's 20% that could bring a protest. And currently in a city or a town, if they change a regulation or restrictions or such, I think it just goes to a hearing within 15 days, and then that body would vote on it. And then this gives those that want to protest it a chance. And currently, like I said, it's 20% that could ask to have a protest. And our current amendment that came from, that's in the bill is 50%. I'm bringing it back down to 33% that could protest, which I think is good. I think we need to protect those, the minority out there, you know, from changes. It could be a developer coming in and building something, you know, big housing development, and I think these people need a chance to protest. So I want to bring it back down, and then I want it to go to 2/3 if it goes back to the body. I think a majority is a little too low.
Okay, any discussion? Senator Grue.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Today's Juxtaposition Day. Your Regulatory Reduction Task Force, it was attempting to make developing some housing that's sorely needed in the state a little bit less cumbersome. We know that people, actually it was suggested to me after we voted on this in first reading, why don't we just leave this to the cities and towns and counties and let them do it themselves? And actually, I think if you knew the truth, the bringer of this, who resides on the first floor in the executive office, would have just as soon done it that way, but we didn't want to go that far. We wanted to have the state weigh in on this. And we weighed in on it, and we studied it very carefully and put in the rates that we did. I think that this raising of those goalposts, raising of these numbers, just make it harder for developers to move forward. But still, we think giving an adequate protection for local citizens. So on and against the amendment. Thank you.
Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, unopposed for a lot of the same reasons. I'd like to point out this is for change in regulations, not for individual projects. And it's kind of interesting. It goes through a pretty rigorous process getting there. And when you move it from half to 2/3, very many of our councils are 5-member councils. So if you think up to the north and what goes on, pretty often 2/3 is a pretty high majority. It's pretty easy to do NIMBY. We just do nothing. And all of us are somewhat resistant to change, but we all need to be open towards doing things and doing it the right way. And there's a process in place. This takes it where it makes it pretty easy to make it where we absolutely do nothing. I think just the opposite of what the bringer says. This is a step too far if we pass this amendment.
Any other discussion? Senator Office.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. On for the amendment, we had a good debate, which my takeaway on that debate was that the legislation as drafted goes a bit too far. It makes it too easy, lowers the standards too much, and also creates a situation where it might be hard to find all of the landowners, particularly in my county, the folks that I represent. You have a lot of out-of-state landowners that would be difficult to contact to put together enough of an interest to get support. So, you know, I mentioned in the previous debate, if it's worth reacting to, it's worth overreacting to, right? So it's one of those things where there's no question that the problem that is being addressed here is a reasonable problem to address. And I think the bill is an appropriate response to the challenges that are being provided. It just seems to go a little too far. This 50% changing to 33%, and then changing the majority to 2/3 seems to be threading the needle, in my view. It takes a middle position between existing statute and the proposal. You can see that it's then more reasonable to be able to get sufficient members to raise the concern. That concern needs a 2/3 majority instead of a simple majority to be easily overridden by the board. And at the same time, it still probably won't allow that one individual to be able to shut down the entire process, which I know is one of the concerns that was raised. So to me, this is a lot closer to where we need to be to thread the needle and provide balance between the property rights of those that are neighboring upon or a part of the zoning change, right? You've got property interests on that side, and then you've got the property interests of the developer. Those should be balanced. It's all about property rights. We all support property rights. We just need to make sure that both are represented in an equitable way so that neither is capable of easily overrunning the other. This seems closer to that sweet spot. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice President. The bringer of the bill, I'm kind of struggling with this one too. To me, the easier it is to change onerous zoning laws protects property rights a lot better. I think this sort of makes it harder if you're struggling with, you know, the county powers that be. And the way it's written right now, without the amendment, I think I like it better just because it goes further in protecting private property rights. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other discussion? Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. So just to remind the body, on Committee of the Whole, we actually reduced, there's 3 factors in this. There's the owners, the property owners, there's the council or the governing body, and then there's a distance. So in the Committee of the Whole amendment, we moderated the distance. We split it, not maybe in the middle numerically, but we split that. All this amendment is doing the same thing with those 2 other factors. To me, that is coming to a balanced place where you are balancing those interests. I think this is more favorable to private property rights than the other, and gives the developer latitude as well. So I'm in support of this amendment because I think it actually balances all 3 components. I wish I could do the algebraic formula still that would tell me how close we are to making this work, but I am supportive of this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, for my second time, this is a two-edged sword. It's more favorable to property owners if your local council is inclined to side with local property owners. If they do not, it's the two-edged sword, and it's actually just the opposite. It breaks it down the other way. And my experience has been, particularly when you get up to the areas that they're resistant to it, you're more likely to have embedded people on a local council or commission that's opposed to it than is in favor of it. So I think the knife cuts both ways. Be very careful what you ask for.
Senator Smith.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Smith.
Mr. Chair, I am going to be for this amendment, and I'll tell you why. It's real simple. There's some things I wasn't thinking about when I voted for the first, for this bill. What if a bar comes into a neighborhood, gaming, porn shops, anything like that, transitional housing, homeless shelter, stuff like that? I think that the bar for development should be quite a bit higher in those circumstances. So I'll be for this amendment.
Senator Ide for his second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After discussing this amendment with the bringer of the amendment, I think I got things confused, a little bit backwards maybe, and I'm in favor of this amendment, just FYI. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Senator Case.
Mr. Vice President, I just called to say that this is our Vice President. He's elected by us all, and we should call him by his title as he sits in the chair of the Senate. Mr. Vice President, thank you for that.
Thank you, Senator Case. Other discussion? Any other discussion? Members, we're on Amendment 1 to Senate File 40. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. The chair division has been called. All those in favor, please stand. Those opposed, please stand. Amendment went to Senate File 40 has passed. Senate File 40 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Bills, Senator Guru,
Mr. Vice President, can I have a privilege of the floor?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Today in the gallery over here, we've got folks from the Equality State Policy Center and the SHAPE program. Over this weekend, gosh, over 25, 30, maybe more folks were here in the capital city going through public policy training and advocacy training. The good majority floor leader and I had the opportunity to have a nice question and answer period with those folks, and I got to tell you, it was very enthusiastic to watch them be enthusiastic. I guess I say that twice. So anyway, if you'd stand and give them a big warm welcome to the folks from the Equality State Policy Center and the SHAPE program.
Bills on third reading. Madam Majority Floor Leader, you have a consent list.
Mr. Vice President, I move the third reading consent list, which is as follows. Senate File 4, State Park Peace Officers Definition and Scope of Authority. Senate File 23, Handicap Placards Healthcare Providers Approval. Senate File 32, Unpaved Roads Speed Limits Amendments. Senate File 43, Temporary Water Use Agreements and Amendments.
You've heard the consent list. Is there anyone? Oh, excuse me. Senator Case.
I'm ready for you to ask for a bill to be removed.
Yes. Is there anyone here who would like any of these bills removed from the consent list? Senator Case.
Yeah, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, I'd like to remove Senate File 4 and Senate File 43.
Let's do regular, because there's no.
And one more. No.
Members, since there are only two bills, we will just do the regular third reading. And we will dispense with the consent list. The clerk will read. So those bills up. Senate File 4, State Park Peace Officers Definition and Scope of Authority. Okay. Excuse me, members. Senate File 4, third reading of the Senate File Bill, handbill. Madam Majority Leader.
Absent objection, I would ask that Senate File 4, State Park Peace Officers Definition and Scope of Authority be laid back for one day.
Without objection.
Inquiry,
Senator Case?
should it still be read in and then we ask it to be led back? I think it should be, because otherwise the journal doesn't reflect that we dealt with it. So I think you have to read it in, and then the motion is appropriate at that time, the request, and then we will read it again tomorrow.
Thank you, Senator Case. We will read it in.
Senate File 4, State Park Peace Officers Definition and Scope of Authority, an act relating to criminal procedure sponsored by the Travel Committee.
Mr. Vice President, absent objection, I request that Senate File 4, State Parks Definitions and Amendments be laid back for one day.
Absent objection.
So ordered.
So ordered. Senate File 23. Senate File 23, Handicap Placards, Healthcare Providers Approval. Clerk will read it in.
Senate File 23, Handicap Placards, Healthcare Providers Approval, an act relating to motor vehicles sponsored by the Labor Committee.
Senate File 32. Is there any discussion on Senate File 23? Call for the vote.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 23. Anderson? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Prego? Aye. Crum? Aye. Dockstetter? Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Garou? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? No. No. Jones? Excused.
Excused.
Kolb excused. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? Aye. Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Aye. Pappas? Aye. Aye. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Aye. Salazar?
Aye.
Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Aye. Smith? No. No. Steinmetz? Excused. President Beitman? Excused. Closing.
Aye to no.
Salazar? Aye to no. Closing vote. Closing. French, aye to no. Closing. McEwen? Aye to no. Aye to no. Closing. Vote. Pearson? Pearson, aye to no. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 23, 20 aye, 7 no, 4 excused.
Senate File 23, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members selected to the Senate, has passed, Senate File 23 has passed the Senate. Senate File 32, unpaved road speed limit amendments. Clerk.
Senate File 32, Unpaved Road Speed Limits Amendments, an act relating to speed limits sponsored by the Transportation Committee.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to explain my no vote on this. It goes back to the concerns in the debate about the potential for liability if we're removing the obligation to have a speed study on a dirt road that can just be effectively appointed by the local authority up to 55 miles per hour. To me, that ends up potentially leading to danger, liability by the local authority, and probably just going a bit too far. The concept of lowering it without obligation, without burden, honestly makes good sense. If you had a 30-mile-an-hour zone, you wanted to lower it to 25, there's not going to be any risk, but the proponents suggested that the local authorities were comfortable with it. I didn't offer an amendment based on that, but I'm personally uncomfortable with the idea of providing that opportunity to declare a 55-mile-per-hour dirt road with no speed study, no study requirements, just based on a vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, Mr. Vice President.
Other discussion? Senator I.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'm a no vote on this as well. I don't think is the comments I made before, I won't belabor that, but given the unilateral authority to the local powers that be there again, I think I don't like that, so I'm a nay on this. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'm an aye vote on this. Listening to all the testimony, it makes perfect sense to give this control to our local folks. We're all about local control in this state. Frankly, I don't buy the argument that we reduce the liability. Speed study or no speed study, the county's still liable if something should happen. Anybody can sue anybody, correct? There's times where a posted speed limit might not be a good thing because of the condition of the road. Dirt roads change greatly, whether they're rutted, whether the gravel has been applied, whether it's even whether it's even a gravel road. I think that our counties will make the right decision, whether there's liability or no liability, as I just don't think that's a big issue. Certainly, I think that it's their call, shouldn't be the state's call. And I urge you to support this legislation. Thank you.
Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, on and for it, there's a key piece of this that we're kind of missing out, back to if you're a private property rights person or for ease of government. It's the speed study, and I can tell you in one of the towns in my district, they forced a speed study on them that raised the cost of a new building substantially to do a speed study where there was already an exit onto the deal. It's really interesting what these speed studies can cost. And if you're somebody that's trying to do something, these speed studies are detrimental as heck. The speed limit up and down, I'm so either way on it. But requiring these speed studies is another layer of government that we just continue to impose on our local governments that either they have to pay for, or if you're coming in and you're causing where it's at, they're gonna add it to the cost of your business. This is a common sense bill for Wyoming.
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, on and for the bill, I certainly hate to vote against a bill that has a common sense component to it. It's your county road and bridge that go out and maintain all of these roads. They're the experts. I think it's just prudent that you give them the opportunity. This was something that happened in Carbon County. They wanted to reduce the speed limits for public safety purposes. But they were told, you can't do this without a transportation study. So consequently, we looked into it, and our road and bridge folks talked to YDOT. It takes a YDOT to go out and do a transportation study. They're the only ones currently under the statutory construct to do this. And they said, with all of our other workload, we may be able to get to it in another year, could be 2 years. Typically, they're hundreds of thousands of dollars for somebody to go out and exercise a little common sense that has jurisdiction. It's their road. They're elected by those local county people. They appoint those people to maintain those roads. So why can we not have a little common sense here and say, let's put the burden of responsibility back on the experts, the county road and bridge people that maintain those roads, reduce the fiscal costs of the state government to do something that's just absolutely obvious that needs to happen, which is modify those speed limits appropriate for the use in those counties by those people in those counties and everybody else that might use them. So on and for common sense, Mr. Vice President.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Either for or against, but just want to provide some clarity that liability concerns over maintaining a road is not one that should be given much attention. So government entities of any kind are not subject to liability for maintenance of roads because of the Governmental Claims Act and governmental immunity that applies. Imagine how many times we'd be getting sued for potholes. So that's not something that's allowed under our laws. That's consistent across all 50 states. So nothing new to Wyoming, but certainly is applicable here. So the concerns over liability, I don't think are warranted. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. One of the key things I keep hearing from my constituents continuously is local control and common sense. This bill is about local control. If you believe in local control, you need to support this bill. Thank you.
Anyone else? Question being called. Senate File 32 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be passed? The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 32. Anderson. Aye. Barlow. Aye. Aye. Boner. Aye. Aye. Brennan. No. No. Case. Aye. Aye. Cooper. Aye. Aye. Crago. Aye. Aye. Crum. Aye. Aye. Dockstetter. Aye. Aye. Driscoll. Aye. Aye. French. Aye. Guru? No. No. Hicks? Aye. Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Aye. Ayed? No. No. Jones excused. Kolb excused. Landon? Aye. Aye. Larson? Aye. Aye. McEwen? Aye. Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Aye. Pappas? Aye. Aye. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? No. No. Salazar?
Aye.
Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Aye. Smith? Aye. Aye. Steinmetz excused. Beitman excused. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 32, 23 aye, 4 no, 4 excused.
Senate File 32 having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 32 has passed the Senate. Senate File 43.
Senate File 43, Temporary Water Use Agreements Amendments, an act relating to water, sponsored by the Agriculture Committee.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. You know, you guys, I'm kind of wondering what we're afraid of. And I think our system of temporaries has worked pretty well. And you know, there seems to be a feeling that temporaries are misused and and that we should only let them go for so long and then put it back in the pool so that other people could take advantage of that. But I submit to you, sir, that a lot of temporaries are well used, and that I'm not really seeing the problem that this bill is trying to address. We spent a lot of time before talking about in-stream flow and, which is permissible in Wyoming, and the discussion was accurate. But it's like we wanted this, most of this bill seemed to be doubling down in the language that we have now taken out of the bill. But it had in it, make sure not gonna have that in-stream flow, no in-stream flow, no in-stream flow. But, Mr. Vice President, the industry that really makes a lot of noise and wants, when a water rights are shook up, they want to get in line and have their water rights. That's the agricultural industry. Proud industry in Wyoming, huge. But a lot of benefits of water, benefits under temporaries, could be for other growing industries in Wyoming and not harm one iota current existing users which are protected. I hope we would take a more broad look at the benefits of different water uses for our tourism industry, for industry, and in many ways, protecting water rights in the process and encouraging that water would be able to be used for uses that are of great benefit to the state of Wyoming. I hope we can send this bill to the waste bin and go back and have real discussions about water in Wyoming and the uses and the possibility that irrigators in a basin could get together and rotate the impacts of alternative water uses from that basin among them over short periods of time as we go forward and achieve great things for Wyoming. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Other discussion? Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Vice President, that was a good articulation of some of the issues out there, but none of those are pertinent to the bill. And so that's a discussion for another day, but specifically this bill deals with just cleaning up an existing statute. And so this is a 1960s era, 60 years old. So let me tell you the genesis of this whole bill. Was a couple of years ago, we had a bill in here dealing with the prescriptive easements, and one of the things that we wanted to do was to make sure that if you used one of those, that you would be able, under this temporary change, not have an abandonment filed. So I went to our staff, Mr. Vice Chairman, or Mr. Vice President, and asked them to go into the temporary water use change statute and include that as an exemption to that particular piece of legislation, and our staff couldn't find it. They couldn't find it in statute. They said, it doesn't exist. I said, no, the state engineer's been issuing these for decades. And because it went down to this little bitty word down there in the existing language, that other uses, other beneficial uses. And so under those few words embedded in all of this language about the Highway Commission and the Highway Department acquiring temporary use of water for highway construction, our state engineers for decades and decades and decades had been issuing these temporary change of use permits. This bill was designed for one thing. The primary purpose was to clean up archaic statutes so that anybody that wanted to do a temporary change of use could find that on our codes. Associated with that, what we found out is historically there was no provision for ever stopping a repetitive petition over and over and over and over and over again. And so we put some sideboards on there as to address these issues that we had a number of times. We had one entity that had filed for over 20 of these 2-year extensions in perpetuity. It was really a permanent change, but they were, let's say, maybe using the statute for not the intended purpose, but there was no provision from the state engineer's office to say, look, that's really a permanent change you've effectuated. So we said, you get 5 years, You can apply for the succeeding 5 years, and after that time, the regulators have to make a decision whether you are consistent with the legislative intent of the statute to implement a temporary, or in fact, you're using the temporary change of use as a perpetual change of use. And so the primary purpose, clean it up, make sure that everybody can find it. And number two, to put some sideboards on how long this can be used. And that's the only thing this bill accomplishes. The amendment that took out the in-stream flows, as you see from the memo that was handed out on second reading, was not even applicable because they're not applicable to temporary changes of use. It's pursuant to the memo that I handed out from the Attorney General of the state of Wyoming. Anyway, Mr. Chairman, on and for the bill. Great articulation. I just don't think it addresses anything that the bill contemplates. So thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Further discussion? Senator Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. As a person that kind of regulated some of these for a while, not anymore, it was kind of tedious every 2 years to see these come forward. So I think this is a good addition to it. Let's make it a 5-year ask, and then you can reapply if you wanted another 5 years. But let's definitely cut it off. If it's more than 10 years, it's probably permanent. So why don't you go apply for it, or go find a way to get water rights, get them transferred or something. So it's a good bill. I ask for your support.
Further discussion? Senator Case.
Mr. Vice President, thank you very much. Thanks for the good discussion from my fine colleagues. My point is that you could have a basin where there's some water available. It could be for, maybe it's an industrial purpose, Mr. Vice President. Maybe it'd provide economic development. Maybe it's for a development that promotes the second biggest industry, which is tourism. I'm not sure what it would be for, Mr. Vice President, but I do understand that nobody that has a water right wants to give that water right up, sir. It's tied to the land, it's our heritage. If you sever it from the land, you'll never have it back. But you might be willing to, for compensation or not, provide the use of that water on a temporary basis. And if you have a basin with several different landowners, several different rights, maybe they could rotate. 2 years here, 2 years here, 2 years here. It doesn't have to be 2 years, could be less. In effect, they pool and manage so that no one is hit very hard. Maybe they're compensated. Water is provided for some benefit to Wyoming, and that benefit could be a lot of things. Why can't we think in that manner, Mr. Vice President? That's what we need to do. Not say, oh no, you can't do that, even though there's people willing to do that, as long as they don't permanently share the burden, permanently lose their water right. They share it. Farmer Smith gives up his water, perhaps for compensation, for this season. Farmer Jones does it for half of next season. And Farmer Brown over there does it for the next season. But they've all agreed on it. And the water's available to provide great things for Wyoming. Who knows what that might be. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senate File 43, having been, was that not the second? Excuse me, Senator Hicks, please, go ahead, sorry. Senator Office.
Thank you. So there's no formal motion. This is third reading. So that means all members get to speak twice, but there's no last speech required. If there's a prime sponsor, there might be some deference to a prime sponsor speaking last, but in this circumstance, rising to respond, there's nobody holding a motion that you have to defer to out of respect.
Thank you for the education, appreciate that. Senator Hicks.
Mr. Vice President, for my second time, nothing in this bill would preclude from my colleague from Fremont County what he described. That is all permissible. This is a voluntary, temporary change of use. And you could do successive landowners or successive water rights. Nothing that he described is precluded from being able to do that under this bill. Just wanted to make that clarification, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Senator Hicks. Other discussion? Anyone else? Question being called. Senate File 43, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be passed? The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 43. Anderson? No. No. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Aye. Brennan? Aye. Aye. Case? No. No. Cooper? No. No. Crago? Aye. Aye. Crum? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Garou? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones, excused. Kolb, excused. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar?
Aye.
Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz excused. President Beitman excused. Closing vote? Cooper? No to aye. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 43, 23 aye, 4 no, 4 excused.
Senate File 43, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 43 has passed the Senate. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Privilege of the floor.
Absolutely.
Good senators, we have up into the gallery to our right a brilliant sophomore at Central High School, Adeline Harpstreet, the daughter of Ashley Harpstreet, here to join us on her day off from school, watching the brilliant work of the Senate. If you could please welcome Adeline to the Senate chamber.
Welcome. Senate File 50, Insurance Holding Company Regulations Amendment, and there is, I think, an amendment.
Senate File 50, Insurance Holding Company Regulations Amendments, an act relating to the Insurance Holding Company System Regulatory Act, sponsored by the Corporations Committee.
Thank you. Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 50 and ask for the body's favorable consideration. Members, you'll recall on second reading, one of our fine colleagues found some basically formatting errors in one of the sections. So that prompted me to actually put a little more time into the bill, and I found what I thought to be another one. So in both conferring with our legislative staff and the department, the agency who's responsible for this, they both agreed. And so what you see here is nothing substantive, actually, except that it actually makes the statute work correctly. So it's a restructuring, but the way it was currently structured, some of the operative language would actually not have fit very well, or did not fit. So if you'd like me to walk you through the bill, I'd be glad to do that, but this is strictly a structural reformatting that makes the bill operational as intended and has been removed, and I will move that third reading amendment number 1 if I didn't already previously do that, and thank you for your favorable consideration.
Clerk will read it in.
Senate File 50, third reading amendment number 1, page 7, line 12, after.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Has the amendment been moved? I think we can move it now.
Senator Barlow.
Mr. Vice President, at the appropriate time, I will move it, which is now. So I will move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 50 and ask for your favorable consideration. Please refer to the previous comments, out of order comments for the explanation of the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Senator Barlow. Senator Landon.
President, I think this is a good time for discussion. I just want to say how impressed I am with my good friend from Campbell County, spending that kind of time on an insurance regulation bill. Really impressive. And I've been sitting over here tracking this, worried about a pretty extensive amendment, but senators, I think it does exactly what you just learned, and that is it kind of cleans this up a little bit. It does not jeopardize that accreditation that we talked about. So on and in support of the amendment.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we're on third reading Amendment 1 to Senate File 50. Roll call. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Third reading Amendment 1 to Senate File 50 has passed. Senator Landon.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. I just wanted to take a moment, if I could, to get back to my colleague from here in Laramie County. She has received a couple of emails in regard to this bill, and I just wanted to reiterate that this bill is an effort by the National Association to get arms around groups which are involved in our insurance industry. We talked quite a bit about that in the previous two iterations, and so the question that was posed to my colleague was, why is this bill needed? Well, that goes to the states gathering together and passing laws that are consistent so that the certification of our insurance companies out across the land is consistent, and they don't have to go through a certification process in every single state. What the commissioners are looking for is whether or not an insurance company can do what it promises that it's going to do for our constituents. Does it have anything to do with the PBMs that my colleague has worked on the past couple of years? No, it does not. It really does not have anything specifically to do with pharmaceuticals, but it does have a lot to do with the company's ability to live up to what it promises it might do in pharmacy coverage, for example. I hope that helps. I think the bill is ready and fine. There are 38 other states that do this, and we will just be doing something that will help our small businesses out across. Large businesses too. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any other discussion? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. There again, I'm not in support of this bill. I haven't been convinced. It appears to me it still expands, government regulation, and it really doesn't do what it's intended to do. So thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice President, the reason we do these kind of bills is we're trying to head off federal regulation. At one time, there was quite an effort to have insurance be federally regulated. And states didn't like that. And insurers, states work for insurers, and that's a good thing. But the companies, they were flirting with the federal regulation. Kind of sounds good. If you can just have one license at the federal level instead of 50 different licenses to sell insurance, kind of sounds good. There's mixed sides to it for sure. But it was definitely farther along than we would be comfortable. As a result, this National Association of Insurance Commissions and Commissioners was formed to provide uniformity across 50 states. And you can imagine with the names of insurance companies that you see today, they're big names. We don't have Laramie County Insurance Company. We have names that are just much, much bigger and broader and encompass all around the country. And that's a good thing, because the risks in one part of the country are different than the risks in another part of the country. So it's good to have big, sound, fiscally responsible companies in this business. It's one of the places where that's important. The other thing, though, that's important is that we don't nickel and dime them to death by having different regulatory schemes in each state so that they don't have to go and prove their financial ability in every single state to provide the same information over and over and over. So far from being a regulatory overreach, Mr. Vice President, what this does is let states rely on the work of other states that are the host states for these very large companies. It also deals with an increasing trend in the market, Mr. Vice President, which is that insurance is an international entity. You'd be surprised how these holding companies involve, companies in different parts. There are famous ones from London, for example. It's very significant. Banks are also very involved in insurance markets and trying to determine the liquidity and all these financial solvency and ability to pay claims. These very large companies requires a uniformity of approach across the states, because you don't want someone to have an ability to maybe hide out in a particular state, for example. So I ask that you pass this bill, Mr. Vice President. I appreciate your consideration, sir. Thank you.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Vice President, in addition to all those valid arguments, this is an area where you do need government regulation. There's a time gap between when you pay for insurance and when if you ever have a claim, you get it settled and paid. You need to have protection that the money will be there, and only the very largest of insurance consumers are in any position to judge the financial capability of individual companies. It needs to be regulated by the government. And Mr. Vice President, the history in this area is that the regulation by the several states has worked very, very well, and the protections have been afforded to the consumers. So this is an area where government regulation does make sense and is being done well by the states. So on and for the bill, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Smith, and then Senator Crum.
Mr. Vice President, I'm against this. It was written by Big Insurance for Big Insurance. My good senator from Fremont County says that, yeah, it's for Big Insurance. That's what I heard, and for the big guy. And that blocks out any competition, real competition coming in my opinion. I think that we already do. We have regulations and standards in place. My good friend here from Casper area had already pointed out that we do have good laws in place, and why do we need this? It's 17 pages. I haven't been convinced why is it so long? I think there's a lot more in here than what we see. Thank you.
Senator Crum.
Yes, I'm in favor of this bill, and I've talked to a large insurance company over the hill, probably Wyoming's largest insurance company, and they would be in favor of this too for the reasons that my senator from Fremont County talked about.
Other discussion? Any other discussion? Senator Case.
Mr. Vice President, we don't want little mom and pop insurance companies jumping up and insuring the city of Cheyenne, so all the roofs in here against tornado damage. We want a company that has the ability to pay those claims. And the trouble is, if we don't do the same thing across all the 50 states, then we're not going to have state regulation, we're going to have federal regulation. And we'll see how you like that. So the states are the crucible by which these regulations are developed. And yes, the bills are long and they're lengthy and they're tedious. That's because the same thing is passed in every state so that we know exactly what that means. And I just can't help the biggest better. I can't. When you have billions of dollars in damage and exposure, billions, trillions, maybe, it's a world where, just think about what's happening in California right now. How'd you like to have a local company insure all those homes and be solely domiciled within that state? Maybe that's the one state that could possibly do it because it's so vast. But we can't. We have to have risk, large companies. We have to know the money's there, that they can pay their claims. And we have to do that because we owe it to the people who elect us, who are the consumers and the people that are protected by these insurance policies, which must be solvent. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Other discussion? Question being called. Senate File 50 having been read 3 separate times. Question is, shall the bill pass? The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 50. Anderson. Aye. Barlow. Aye. Boner. Aye. Brennan. Aye. Case. Aye. Cooper. Aye. Crago. Aye. Crum. Aye. Dockstetter. Aye. Driscoll. Aye. French. No. Guru. Aye. Hicks. Aye. Hutchings. Aye. Ide. No. Jones excused. Kolb excused. Landon. Aye. Larson. Larson, no. McEwen. No. Nethercott. Aye. Olson. Aye. Pappas. Aye. Pearson. No. Rothfuss. Aye. Salazar.
No.
No. Schuler. Aye. Scott. Aye. Smith. No. Steinmetz excused. President Beitman excused. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 50, 20 aye, 7 no, 4 excused.
Senate File 50, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, has passed the Senate. Madam Majority Leader.
Mr. Vice President, I move that the Senate resolve itself into Committee of the Whole.
You have heard the motion. Excuse me. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Thank you. There you go.
Okay. Committee of the Whole will please come to order. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 72. The reading clerk will read the bill. Oh, you need it. Huh.
Senate File 72, Summer Vacation Preservation Act, an act relating to education modifying the duties of the State Board of Education and approval to the alternative scheduling for a school year. Sponsored by Senator Brennan, was referred to Committee Number 4, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Brennan, Olson, Rothfuss, and Schuler. No, Senator Scott. Senator Schuler, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Senator Schuler, Chairman. Oh, that's my job, huh?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it does so with the do pass recommendation for Senate File 72, Summer Vacation Preservation Act, and to describe the bill, I would call on Senator Brennan.
Senator Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, Senators. This is a bill that we saw last year, a great little bill that will provide some much-needed rest to our teachers and students throughout the summer. What this bill does is it asks that our schools start after Labor Day and that they get finished before Memorial Day each year. We do this in the bill by taking the number of required days of instruction from 175 to 165. We do not touch any of the state board rules that they have in place, and the number of hours of seat time remains the same for our students. And then we also take teacher development days from 10 to 5. By doing this and asking our schools to run from Labor Day to Memorial Day, we can give our students and teachers the much needed rest that we have. This also will help with our small businesses and our tourism, as it's going to free up those that are in the teaching profession that want summer jobs, as well as for our high school students who would like to get some practical experience where they can put their knowledge to use within the summer. They'll be able to do that, as we've found that a lot of businesses don't hire high school students these days because of how early they have to go back to school. One thing that we don't want to happen in this bill that was a concern with the body down the hall last year was that teachers would get paid less. We want teachers to get paid for teaching, not necessarily the number of days or hours that they do so. So we've addressed that in section 3, that no school district shall decrease any teacher's salary as a result of this act. This is the gist and the basics of the bill, and I ask for your favorable consideration.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just want to commend the sponsor for all of her work on this bill over the past couple of sessions. I signed on to this bill, Mr. Chairman, because it might be one of the single most reasons that constituents come to me. This, in my mind, is a small business bill. And the reason I say that is it's the businesses that want to visit with me about this all the time, mostly around our summer resorts, but certainly in the fast food industry, in the restaurant and lodging community, on all fronts. And I think we can do this. And I think I appreciate the Education Committee helping to work on this bill. I like the bill, and I'm in support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate what we're trying to do with this bill, but this again comes back to local control. In a lot of our small communities, we shut down the first week of hunting season. That's like a national holiday in our community. We also shut down a nice spring break during calving season. Those are important things to us. And it's not what's good for this community or the big oil city does not work well for our small communities. This is overreach by the state. This needs to be a local control issue with our school boards. We need to get our governance back close to home. Thank you.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, on for the bill. Getting to the local control issue, it is an important issue, and this bill is structured very much to support local control. In fact, right now, we have a restrictive minimum number of school days and provisions, and this loosens those up with the intent of providing more flexibility to school districts. The intent of trying to make sure that we're matching the Labor Day and Memorial Day holidays and providing a larger period of summer is a consistent effort, but at the same time, there are alternative schedules allowed by statute where you literally just apply if you want to work outside of the boundaries of what's suggested, and then that has been approved as long as you have an educationally consistent interest. So for example, we have school districts around the state that have 4-day weeks. Great example of a required alternative schedule. It meets the right number of hours. It's consistent with the local school board's interests. So that's allowed. But
when we looked around the rest of the country, it turned out we were pretty restrictive as a state in terms of the minimum number of days required. And that leads to a shortening of the summer because you still have to have your professional development days, you still have to have all of the holidays that were discussed, you still need perhaps to have first day of hunting season off and your spring break and whatever else you need. Other states have lower thresholds. We're at 175. Some states are down around 160, for example. That doesn't mean that you're limited to that number of days by any stretch of the imagination. So a district could really continue to do things exactly as they are right now. This provides substantially more flexibility to the school districts, but it does really request that you try and keep that Memorial Day to Labor Day open for the reasons that we've discussed. However, again, if a district has a reason, there's nothing here that is a firm shall, because you can make the request for an alternative schedule and do it as you see fit, if that's in the best interest of your educational community. But one of the things that really led to this is, over the time that I've served on the Legislative Education Committee, and this is my 15th year now, we have really increased the rigor, the academic rigor, the performance. We've made some incredible changes that have improved our schools in the state of Wyoming and improved the performance, Mr. Chairman, of our students in those schools. But what we've seen diminish over time, regrettably, with those improvements and increased rigor is joy in education, happiness, particularly in the later grades. Our students are getting burned out in school. And that happens when you increase academic rigor. But we hear from the RIDE initiative, for example, which was going around the state, trying to talk to educators and parents, families, communities, trying to explore what the challenges were. Mental health in the schools, both for the teachers and for the students, has risen as a challenge. Well, in talking about this bill and in developing this bill, the first thought was, all right, well, what can we do that is a simple, straightforward thing that might address a complicated problem? And that was, let's try and take a little bit of the pressure off. Let's take the pressure off the districts by allowing them to have fewer days. Let's try to signal from the legislature that we want a full and robust summer break so that these students can mentally refresh themselves, have jobs if they're interested in jobs, have adventures, join organizations, support their community, take some time away from school to re-energize and then get back to school seriously in the fall. So the motivation here is not to take away local control. It's to provide more tools, but also to signal from the legislature that it's okay to bring some joy back to school. We know we put a pretty heavy set of standards, requirements, and academic rigor on your plate over the past 10 years, but we want to make sure that we've also got joy in education as a paramount point of what we're stressing, Mr. Chairman. So that's the motivation behind this, and that's why I support the bill. Thank you.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question. Would this bill preclude a district from going year-round school?
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I believe it would not, but I think you'd have to get a special schedule approved. Mr. Chairman, I rise because I was the no vote in committee. I just wanted to explain. I'm in sympathy with what the bill is trying to do. I think that we do need to have the summer blocked off. I think that one of the things we're doing right now with the current system is that too many of the high school kids are not getting the work experience that many of us had that got a summer job and learned from it. And I think that's important. What I think is this Memorial Day happens to be a little too quick. And if we should have allowed an extension into about the first week of June so that we could keep that 175 days, I'm a little concerned about losing that extra time. So, Mr. Chairman, that's why I was a no vote. I would say I'm basically in sympathy with where the bill's trying to go.
Senator Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate some of the questions and some of the concerns that have been raised as for the senator that asked about year-round. That was one of my big things. If a school district wanted to go year-round in our state, I would not want to prohibit them from that. That's why there is in here provision that districts can ask for an alternative schedule. Again, if there's a hunting season, if there's other things that are more important in a community, there's this alternative schedule. As for the senator's concern about the number of days, what we find is that it's the number of hours and the number of seat time and instructional time that our kids get that is a bigger indicator of their success rather than the number of hours. I would also argue that rigor too within the curriculum could be part of that, but it's really those number of hours, and we've done the calculations. We can get the number of hours that our students need within this 165 days. There's private schools across the country that do this all the time. So we can do that within the state, again, allowing for more flexibility for the school districts to be able to work and get in the schedules and the breaks and the vacations that they need while still providing our students with a good quality education.
Is there any further discussion on? Okay. Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to make sure I think I understand the bill, but in two parts of the bill, we go to 165 days. And then in the final section of the bill, it talks about 170 days, and that's actually eligibility for funding. So I want to understand why we're using 165 in the two first sections of the bill, or two statutes, and then we go to 170. And I understand that there's a equivalent hours component in that, but I just somebody speak to that discrepancy in those two timelines. And the second thing I would offer or ask for some comment back from the folks that heard this bill and have been working on this bill is, it seems like when I hear from educators, including my wife, who's been in the public education system and a private education system, it's the length of the summer break that is the challenge. The longer their kids are out, the less retention they have from the previous years. So are we actually compounding an issue that is a challenge? So now we're going to have more makeup work, if you will, catch-up work in a shorter year, and we're going to spend more time doing that. So comments on those 65 versus 170 that are within the bill, and then some thought or feedback on what the testimony has been from educators that may say, hey, we're going to have more to make up or less retention from the previous year if we extend that gap, if you will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hutchings.
Kind of hitchhike on his question. What were we doing before, like in the 60s and 70s with vacations and retention of knowledge during and after the summer break? Someone has an answer for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll address first the discrepancy, or it's not really a discrepancy in the bill, but why it looks like that is because where we have 165 or cross out the 175, that's where we have the number of required days that students have to be in. And then when we go to page 4 and we strike out 185 and it says 170 days, that adds in the days that the school has to be in session, and that includes the teacher training days in there. As far as students retaining knowledge, I appreciate what the good senator from Laramie County had to say, asking about what happened back in the 1960s. Schools used to run from Labor Day to Memorial Day, and I would argue that those students' knowledge, they came out of high school just fine with their knowledge. I don't have any data, but I think that if you've got 10 weeks of break, you're gonna lose so much, and you're not gonna lose a much more if we add on those extra 2 weeks for kids to be able to, and teachers to be able to have a full summer vacation. We're still gonna have to review a little bit, but I don't think that the review is gonna be that significant.
Is there any further discussion on the bill? Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'd like to reiterate my support for what they're trying to do, but this takes us one step closer to a centralized state school board. That's not where we need to go. We're going the wrong direction with this. This is local control. It needs to stay in the hands of our local school districts. Thank you.
Is there any further, Senator Pearson?
Thank you, Chairman. So I just had a question. So how would this affect activities that generally start practices and stuff like that in August? And like I know that there are sporting events over Labor Day weekend and stuff like that. I'm usually the one to drive because all the other drivers want to have that weekend off. So anyway, I just wanted to see how that would affect activity schedules. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Oh, Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate the sponsor's response to the day difference. But to clarify, just to make sure I understand it, what we're actually doing is cutting teacher in-service days in half. So instead of 10 days a year, now they're going to have 5 days a year. And I mean, what's the feedback from educators and from administration on that part of the component? Part of having teachers that are refreshed and invigorated is give them time to actually work together, collaborate, professional learning communities, et cetera, and they do those on in-service days when students aren't there. So we're cutting that in half as well, at least the way I understand the explanation. So any feedback on testimony on that issue, I appreciate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion on the bill? Senator Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as the activities and events, this doesn't go into this. This is just our instructional education. This doesn't go into athletics. And the good senator across the room from me is correct. We are cutting the in-service days in half. The feedback, as I've talked to teachers over the years, not just since this, but over the years, teachers have talked about how their in-service days are they could be doing other things, maybe more meaningful with some of the in-service days that they've had. I've even had a teacher who said that their principal put together PowerPoints that they had to look at, and then the principal went on a 3-day vacation during in-service times. So I think we could get meaningful teacher in service into these 5 days of training, and there's nothing in here that precludes teachers from doing extra learning and gaining knowledge to teach our students that they want to do.
Senator Olson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to address some of the questions from the good senator from up in the Northeast Territory of Wyoming. During testimony in the committee, we did not hear any concerns or negative testimony from the associations or organizations that represent our administrators and our teachers. I'm not sure if that necessarily means that they give their tacit consent to this. I won't speak for them, but I will say we didn't hear that testimony. I am a co-sponsor on this bill, and I have spoken with numerous teachers. And what I've learned is that in today's world, with all of the technology that they have, the teachers actually collaborate weekly across their disciplines. And so the need for the in-service days has decreased significantly with the use of technology now. And I have not come across an educator yet who said that they didn't want less in-service days. The reality is, as long as their pay is untouched, which this legislation does not affect their pay, they want less in-service days. That's a consistent message, at least that I've heard. So hopefully that helps alleviate some questions or concerns that others may have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any further discussion on the bill? If not, are you ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Schuler's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with recommendation that Senate File Number 44 do pass, please say aye. Oh, man, I'm on the wrong one. I better cross that out. I think we'll do it again. Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Schuler's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File Number 72 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 72 has passed the Committee of the Whole. Majority Floor Nethercott. Oh, that's important. I think
Mr.
it's
Chairman, I move that the Committee of the Whole beg leave to rise and sit again.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Senator Hutchings.
Gotta find you. Thank you. Just a quick reminder that the homeschool Wyoming is here. They're providing lunch, so you can come down and learn about homeschools from the experts and talk to some of the parents and students in the extension room 26. Thank you, sir.
I think I am supposed to turn it over to the Vice President, Salzar.
Madam Majority Leader, we're looking for a motion. Okay, then we are on announcements.
We're on lunch recess. Mr. President, I move that we stand recessed until 2 p.m.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. That's what I thought. Announcements.
I should have done that before the vote.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Shaking the cobwebs, week 2, 5th day. Your Labor Committee, number 10, will meet today at 12:30 to give you adequate time to go down to the homeschool reception in room W110 to take up Senate File 36, Music Therapy, Use of Title. Again, it's at 12:30 in W110. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Vice President, your committee number 2 appropriations will meet at 12:10 in appropriations room 301. Also, appropriations will meet tonight upon adjournment in room 301 for a joint meeting with the House on the budget.
Thank you, Senator Driscoll. Senator Landon.
Mr. Vice President, thank you. Just a heads up for tomorrow, your Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee will have a busy morning. We will meet at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning in the usual, the Wind River Basin, room 4, and we will take up Senate File 2, Hunting Licenses Weighted Bonus Point System. That's at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. We'll come back in at noon in the same room in W4 downstairs. Upon noon recess, we will take up Senate File 3, Mule and Whitetail Deer Separate Hunting Seasons. So 2 separate meetings for the Travel, Recreation, Wildlife Committee. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Chairman Anderson.
Mr. Vice President, your favorite committee, Minerals, will meet today, January 20th, upon noon recess, as soon as you get done eating, in Capital Extension Room 4 and online we will consider Senate File 19, impact assistance payments, maximum percentages, and review. Thank you.
Senator Hicks? Chairman French?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Committee number 5, Agriculture, tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in Committee Room 6, will work 3 bills. Senate File 63, State Lands Fencing. Senate File 80, Abandonment of Water Rights Limitations. And Senate File 82, Omnibus Water Bill Planning.
Chairman Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Your committee number 1, Judiciary, will meet tomorrow upon noon recess to consider 3 Senate files. Senate File 8, Protection Orders Effective During Appeal or Review. That's a continuation from our previous meeting on the 16th. Senate File 9, the Restoration of Rights Amendments. And Senate File 39, Automatic Transfer of Automobile Title Upon Death. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Chairman Pappas?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I noticed this last week, but I want to remind everyone that your Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs Committee will meet tomorrow, Tuesday, January 21st, in the Capitol Extension Room W002 and online at 8 a.m. We will consider the following bills. Senate File 26, Protection of Military Equipment. Senate File 27, Wyoming National Guard Member Referral Amendments. Senate File 29, Firearm Hold Agreement, Limited Liability. And Senate File 31, Boards and Commissions, Veterans Ex Officio Members. And Senate File 28, ROTC Endowment Program, if time permits.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman McEwen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will be meeting at 12:15 in room number 6, Senate Revenue Committee number 3, where we will hear Senate File 69, Homeowner Property Tax Exemption, and Senate File 58, Elimination of Sales Tax on Firearms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any other announcements? Senator Driscoll, I just want to make sure, I wasn't sure, but the Joint Appropriations Committee meeting will be meeting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. on the supplemental budget in room 301. So with that, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, we will recess until 2 p.m. today.